When it comes to the home ports of Mortal Kombat 2, the first thing that come into most people's minds are the superb PC version, the Genesis, 32X, NES, maybe the PlayStation and the Saturn ports of the game. However, there were some additional ports as well that did not receive too much spotlight, one of them being the Amiga version of Mortal Kombat 2, which if you take the limitations of the hardware in account, was actually a superb port. Today I will have a detailed look and do a proper review about this infamous Amiga version. First of all, what is or was Amiga? In case you haven't heard of it, it was a groundbreaking personal computer made by Commodore in the mid-1980s that lived and prospered till the early 1990s. It was especially popular in Europe and in other PAR regions and was one of the best gaming platforms among other things in the early years of video gaming. Up to this day, it has a vast array of great titles and games available for it and is a system that should be owned by all retro gaming and computing fans. It had numerous models. The best-selling ones were the Amiga 500, 600 and the 1200 version. It was really popular in Europe, but in the US it enjoyed only a moderate success. It had a built-in hard drive which had about 20 or 40 megabyte space, but this could be more or less depending on the specific model. CPU speed was about 25 MHz. So, going back to the Amiga port of Mortal Kombat 2. This version was also ported by Probe Entertainment and then published by Acclaim. It looks like the Amiga version is more or less a port of the Genesis version. However, I think it does a far better job than the Genesis version if you take the capabilities of the platform and the quality of the actual port into account. I should start by mentioning the bad things first, get them out of the way in order to focus on the positives for the majority of the review. Mortal Kombat 2 on the Amiga came on 3 floppy disks, and although Amiga had a built-in hard drive, there was no way to make full install for the game, which meant loading and disk swapping, and actually you had to do that quite a lot. Now, for this review I'm using an Amiga emulator to record the footage, and playing the game this way actually relieves me of the annoying disk swapping. But it could be a real pain in the ass on the real Amiga hardware back in those days if you only had one floppy drive. Now let's have a look at what this game has to offer. As for the graphics, it's similar to the Genesis version in terms of looking. It might look a bit dull, pixelated, but still this is Mortal Kombat. If you had an Amiga back in those days, having MK2 in this quality on your machine was a real dream come true. If you are not used to older games like I do, you might just say that this looks like crap. Nothing like the original, but believe me, back in those days this was considered to be an excellent home port for the Amiga version, with most of the bells and whistles that MK2 had to offer in the arcades or on other ports. Due to the system limitations, there is however one very notable difference in comparison to other ports, and these are the backgrounds. Although all of the backgrounds are included from the arcade with a great detail, they are all static on this port. You no longer see the evil monks hover in the tower or on the portal stage, and the trees in the living forest are all silently witnessing the fights in the woods. Nevertheless, I think this was a good trade-off to have all of the backgrounds and keep speed of the game as well. In fact, this did not bother me at all with this version, and even though the backgrounds are ported from the Genesis version, they still look badass and very Mortal Kombat-alike. The characters themselves have become a bit more pixelated, but they are very well recognizable and retain their original looks in overall. Like I said, if you take the limitations of the Amiga into account, this version is really a well-crafted port and not just a half-ass finished product like the shitty Genesis version was. On the Amiga version it shines that the developers actually took the time to tailor the game as much as possible to the platform as they could, and they really did a great job with it. The game has received very high remarks from the majority of the Amiga magazines back in those days. As for sounds and music, in terms of Amiga this was amazing You had super quality sound effects, and the game now offered full digitized speech. Apart from Shao Kahn announcing the number of rounds, everything was there. Fatality, flawless victory, character names, and Shao Kahn now had all of his tones, in contrast to like the Genesis and even the 32X version, where he could only say "you will die." In the Amiga version he has all of his speeches. Sound effects differed from the arcade version, but were nevertheless cool, like the effect of your opponent hitting the ground after a jump kick. This was a real kick-ass sound effect. As for the music, it has been reworked for the Amiga, and there are only a couple of tunes played in the background, so not all of the actual arcade tracks were translated. The end result is nevertheless still great, as especially like the music of the intro. It sounds very cool with the Amiga sound chip. As for the content, the sport has everything the Genesis version had, plus even more. All of the characters are in the game, and each of them has retained all of their special moves. Every stage that was in the arcade version is also available in the Amiga version. Like I mentioned before, the backgrounds on the Amiga port are all static, but they look great nevertheless. Actually, in terms of stages, it is even beyond the Genesis version, as the Amiga version has the secret Goro's Lair stage included as well. Along with this, all of the hidden fighters can be encountered in this version. Jade,
Fight.
Smoke, and Noob Saibot as well. In this version, you only had to reach 25 wins in a row to be able to fight Noob Saibot. The hidden characters have retained the insane speed which they had on the arcade versions, and they will kick your ass in a matter of seconds. Due to system limitations, the intro sequence from the arcade is not included in any form in the game. Missing are as well the biography screens in demo mode. In addition, once you beat Shao Kahn, there are no ending pictures, just text messages like on the Genesis version, which is a shame, but in terms of Amiga I can understand the decision to cut these. Apart from these missing parts, everything is there really. All of the fatalities, babalities, friendship have been retained. Let's have a look at the stage fatalities first. Here's the Deadpool fatality. Although the AWA Easter egg is missing from this port, it is still great. In the Kombat tomb, similar to the arcade, you can hit your opponent up on the spikes, and if you keep pressing down they will eventually slide off the spikes, just like in the arcade. As for Pit 2, arguably the best stage fatality in the whole MK series, that is MK9 included, has unfortunately suffered greatly in terms of quality on the Amiga. It is there but barely resembles the original one. Here is a bit of demo about the quality of the various finishers in this port. Although they are a bit downgraded in quality, everything is there, just like in the original one.
Baraka wins. Raiden wins. Friendship. Scorpion wins. Babality.
The gameplay and computer AI are pretty much identical to the arcade version, which is a definite plus. You can simply use all of the good old tactics to fight your way through the ladder. There is however one big setback due to the limitations of Amiga, and that is the control scheme for this game. You are limited to use only one single fire button. Actually, you can set it up to use two buttons as well, but believe me, that doesn't make any big difference. So how do you control a game that's supposed to have 5 buttons, excluding the start button, with only one single button? Well, Probe actually managed to do it. Based on which direction you are putting the joystick and pressing the button, you are performing different moves. For example, if you want to do a sweep, you will need to press down and then back. You don't need to need to use the button for this. Uppercut remained unchanged, down plus fire, but blocking is actually a problem. In order to block, you would have to press back and fire button at the same time. It's a bit crazy and might sound like hard to pull off moves this way, but once you get used to it, it actually works out just fine. What about the bosses? Each of the bosses are included in this port as well. After kicking Shang Tsung's ass, you get to face off against Kintaro. He's a bit easier than in the arcade version, it's pretty much the same as on the Genesis. In terms of Amiga, he does look great and can still be a pain in the ass if you don't watch out. He has the same moves, just like he did in the arcade version. As for Shao Kahn, like I said earlier, he has all of his taunts and speeches in this port, which is a great plus. Remember, these were not included, not even on the superior 32X version. Shao Kahn does his usual MK2 thing, mainly uses brute force to crush you. It is a bit harder to defeat him in this version, just because, due to the control scheme, you will not be able to use blocking and uppercutting so easily as you would do on the arcade. After beating him, like I said earlier, the ending pictures are absent and only text is being displayed. All in all, I think the Amiga version is a great port and is a must-have for every Mortal Kombat collectors. By this I mean you should probably get your very own copy of it, the original one. Right now it's pretty easy to get hold of it on eBay. The game itself usually comes with the original boxing and manual. The box art and manuals are identical to that of the PC version, so they both look great. The easy way to check out and test this game out for yourself is, of course, going to the internet and searching for the digital copies of the actual game discs, and then just download an Amiga emulator and just play with it. If you are a person like me who is pretty much hooked up on Mortal Kombat 2 and want to experience Mortal Kombat 2 on every possible platform that it was released on back in those days, I think you should go for it and test it out for yourself. If you are a true fan, you won't be disappointed.